this particular article is really of interest to me because of this community, Richmond. They started just from saying we need to pay attention to this trauma-informed, this ACEs science stuff. Let's look into it and let's make this a year-long project. So it was ACEs who got together and said that. And then, you know, here we are 8 years later, and they have more than 500 people now in the initiative, and they have several committees and many organizations, and we actually have been in touch with them off and on over the years, but I didn't realize how much they have been doing, how much you all have been doing, Melissa and Lisa, until I did the story, and I thought, wow, these people need to get a lot more attention and get the word out about all the work that they're doing, because they can really provide a lot of help and guidance to the initiatives that are just coming up. So Melissa, I think I'll start with Lisa first. Lisa, if you could just do a short introduction for yourself, and then we'll go to Melissa, and then we'll start with the questions.
Hi, my name is Lisa Wright, and I work for Greater Richmond SCAN, or Stop Child Abuse Now. And I am a licensed clinical social worker. The main role that I have here at SCAN is to oversee our outpatient treatment program at our Child Advocacy Center program. And I am one of the Greater Richmond Trauma-Informed Community Network coordinators, along with Melissa. And I chair two of the committees that we have that really tie very closely with the work that I do at the Child Advocacy Center. And I'm also an adjunct faculty for the School of Social Work at Virginia Commonwealth University, so VCU, that's close by.
Thanks, Lisa. Melissa?
Yes, hello everybody. I'm also a licensed clinical social worker, work full-time at Greater Richmond SCAN. I am the director of all of our community-based prevention programs, which includes the Trauma-Informed Community Network and all of our training and consulting around trauma responsive practices. So a lot of work with organizations and systems. And I have now, over the last couple of years, become kind of the state coordinator for the Virginia TICNs, which you'll hear more about in a little while. It's kind of the statewide coalition of networks. And then also part-time faculty in VCU School of Social Work.
Great, thank you very much. So why don't we start with the origins of the GRTICN? Because I think your story is so interesting, especially how, you know, you thought this was just going to be a one-year endeavor, and here now it's going to be a forever endeavor. So Lisa or Melissa, which one of you want to start this part?
I'll start this part, and I actually am just in this just a few months longer than Melissa, so we really have been in it since the very beginning together, thankfully. So it started really with the conversation with our executive director, Jeanine Harper, who across all the different programs that we have at Greater Richmond SCAN, we were hearing and noticing that people didn't really seem to have an understanding about how trauma was impacting the kids that we work with, the families that we work with, the professionals that we work with. And so we started an internal discussion first of, you know, is there something that we can do? And is everybody else seeing this? So we pulled in several other people. So it was a really small group in the very beginning from about, I guess it was 5 different agencies. And just to have the conversation of, is this something that everybody else is noticing too in the work that we're doing? And everyone agreed that it was a need within our community, that there needed to be education, that there needed to be more of a shared language and people really understanding how to make recommendations for people who've experienced trauma, how to better understand when kids are presenting, you know, with these really hard behaviors, necessarily of what's driving that. And we all agreed that something needed to be done, except for one person, which I always qualify, who said, and this is really looking at the child welfare system. So I'm going to say that's really how we began, looking at child welfare workers. This person said child welfare workers are already really overwhelmed, like to add something else for them to do, another initiative for them to learn would be just too much. And then we had the conversation of if people really understand what a trauma-informed lens looks like, what ACEs science means, you know, for the community that we have, it really should help to make people's jobs easier in the long run. It isn't like just an extra thing. It's really how you look at all of the work that you've done. So we, thankfully, she now agrees with us that it was the right thing to do. And it is somebody who worked on like a state level in the child welfare system. So really having an understanding that child welfare workers really do have a lot, and we know that, and certainly want to make the work easier and not harder for them. We started with this 1-year timeline of helping two main departments of social services who were really at a place of being ready, I think, for assessment and really trying to get a better sense of what did their agencies need. And that timeline, which it's still on our website in our history document, if you care to look at that, but it was a 12-month plan. So really we were gonna come in, you know, was our plan to help these two very, very large agencies become more trauma-informed. And along the way, we really did hope that once the child welfare workers understood and learned the language in a different way, that it would ripple out across different disciplines and sectors. So if they were making recommendations to the court in a different way, then the judges might gain this understanding of, you know, what does this really mean for the kids and families we work with? And we just were not prepared, I think, with how quickly it spread and how so many people were really embracing and understanding and interested to learn about just how to apply this to the work that they were doing. And I will say too that a lot of the agencies that we first talked to were very, very interested in how the work impacts the work, so how it affects the professionals. That's something that people could grasp onto pretty easily. So that was really the beginning part. And we were also doing a lot of work as an agency, as social work discipline, of looking at all the really amazing things that were coming out back then. So this was like 2010, 2011. So really listening closely to people like Bessel van der Kolk, Bruce Perry, Rick Gaskell. NCTSN was coming out with really amazing information, and same with SAMHSA. So just using that as, you know, not even a starting point, but just a jumping off place. There was already a lot of resources for us to share and to borrow from, which we continue to do and continue to share everything that we have, because really our interest is that people get the information, and Melissa will talk later just about the training that we make available for everybody. And we just wanted to not have barriers in the way. So when we come in, even to help these agencies, it really was at no cost to them. We did it through our agency. So coming in to do like the trauma-informed agency assessment and that sort of a thing has continued to be what we carry along even, you know, this many years later. Anything I missed, Melissa, in the origin or early days?
I would just add, in those early days, we really started with existing relationships that we had, you know, especially within our multidisciplinary team partners, you know, were often some of the first people that were at the table. And then, you know, as we started to meet more frequently, more people would be invited. You know, who else? Schools need to be here, and healthcare needs to be here, and you know, it just kind of rippled from there and really moved quickly from just being child welfare focused to really community focused. And it's, like Lisa said, it's really just exploded from there.
So why don't you talk a little bit about how the initiative is organized? I think that's how that grew. I think that's pretty interesting.
Mm-hmm. So we did, in the early timeline that we have, we were looking at the different areas of the things that we were really setting out to do. And as we had probably maybe about 25, 30 people, we really wanted to bring people into an area of their interest. So we really broke it down in that timeline of what these I think we might have called them work groups in the very beginning, but now they are committees of our network. So we did have training, brief screening tool committee, work groups, at the time, workforce development, and what were the earlier ones, Melissa? Because the more discipline related ones are not, they're ones that came up later.
Mm-hmm.
Are those the ones?
Yeah, and I would also add, Lisa, part of our motivation for breaking into those work groups were that, many people came to the network because they did have a direct passion or area of focus. And we could easily spend an entire meeting just kind of all talking about our different areas of focus. And we found that it just made more sense to kind of develop these committees or work groups where we could have a more, just a more focused discussion with people that were very passionate about that topic area. So folks that really wanted to create more trauma-informed schools and change practices and policies in a school setting could come to our schools committee and have that discussion. And, and that's kind of how we even thought about, why to kind of to separate in that way. And we've just found that's been just a really helpful format moving forward.
Mm-hmm. So it did start out with like the initial things we were really trying to do with the child welfare systems, and then expanded, like Melissa's saying. So as the people were added to our network, and these different areas of expertise and areas of interest were developed, is how we came up with the 9 committees that we have now today. I think it's changed a little bit over the years, just in terms of what's been needed, what's been requested. We've tried to stay very responsive to the community and to what the network members have asked for. I think we're getting ready to shift just a little bit more in the next year or so, just given things that have presented here over the last 6 months. But the structure seems to work. We also have asked people to join, invited people to join the committees, and also like special work groups at times, but it's never been something that's mandatory for people as they're coming in.
Great, thanks.
The work group typically, the work groups or committees typically meet on the opposite month of when our large group meets. So it's also we're not trying to add, too much to anyone's plate. And then we use that large meeting to come together to have our committee chairs, report out on what's happening in the other committees so that the rest of the network can just kind of stay involved and kind of know the different initiatives and projects that are happening.
Great, thank you. Melissa, could you talk a little bit about the health care committee? Is that the right name for it, and what you all have done? Because that's a pretty large committee.
Sure. It is. So the healthcare committee started a couple years ago because we started to have more individuals join our TICN that worked in the healthcare field in some way. And many people were joining our network because they were interested in learning more about how to infuse trauma-informed practices and policies and just strategies into their organization. So we set up the healthcare committee a little differently than some of our other committees. We set it up as really as a learning collaborative where, because we had a lot of different individuals who worked in agencies such as, public health, community health clinics, small pediatric practices, health systems, so hospitals, yoga studios, you name it. We have just a wide range of individuals. But many of their agencies were at different stages of, becoming more trauma-informed or trauma responsive. So we would use this as a place to kind of talk about the challenges we were running into, talk about the different new initiatives we were implementing in our agency, and really be able to use one another. Many of the individuals that are part of that committee would also be considered, competitors at times. We have many managed care plans, from Aetna to Cigna to Anthem, and that are there, but they're there in a different way because they have this shared vision, and they're there to really use one another and support one another. So it's just such a different feel. People just sharing information, and then because of the work we're doing in the healthcare committee, we were asked to present at a meeting for local hospital system administrators. because they were interested in potentially becoming more trauma informed within their hospital systems. And after that presentation, our 3 major health systems in our region decided to embark on this health system collaborative. They called it a trauma-informed health system collaborative. So we've done that for the last couple of years, and we identified, they identified 1 hospital in each of their systems to begin with, and then they also identified 1 unit within their hospital to start. So they chose the pediatric departments, created trauma-informed leadership teams within each of those hospitals and pediatrics. They did organizational assessments to get a baseline level of understanding of what practices and policies those areas were already doing. They did foundational training on trauma resilience for all of their staff, focus groups, recommendations, and then they come back to our healthcare committee to talk about how things are going. You know, what's going well, what's not, how do we navigate barriers? And it's just been pretty remarkable what they've been able to accomplish. And there has been a rippling effect within a number of those hospitals where it's spread beyond pediatrics and even beyond those hospitals to other parts of their networks.
That's terrific. I mean, look what has happened, you know, from 8 people and a 1-year plan to all this work. It's amazing. Lisa, can you talk a little bit about the, is it Legal and Courts? Is that the name of the committee?
Yeah, so we have in the Legal and Courts Committee, we're bringing in people from many different disciplines. So we have mostly juvenile domestic relations court folks. So we have judges, Commonwealth attorneys, defense attorneys, clerks, sheriffs, especially for the city of Richmond, the juvenile courts, and also from correctional facilities around here. So for the adolescents mostly. And then also with law enforcement are involved, and then a lot of different partners that work with any of these disciplines have come into this committee. So there's about 60 of us on the committee. And we've done a lot of assessment. So a lot of going into the agencies to talk to people and doing focus groups, which a lot of the leadership that we have found when we've done any sort of assessment, they really value the focus group feedback. I think it's been better than the surveys that we've sent out for people to share information. And we, sit down with a group of 8 to 10 people, however many focus groups we need to do, which sometimes has been a lot, to ask these questions about their understanding of, what does trauma even mean? What can they do within their setting? What is provided for them? What sort of support is there for them within their agency? Just a variety of questions. And I saw in the chat, there was a question about trauma-informed organizational assessments. And we actually put together a document that has all of the ones that we found. And it is on our website, and I can send it to you, Jane, while we're on here, or post it if we can do that. And we actually try to be really sensitive to all of the agencies that are asking us to do something like that, to share this document with them of here are all of your options. And with the Legal and Courts Committee, we have used a couple of different ones. Again, we offer it to the agency, have met with leadership because in many of these agencies, there's such a hierarchy. So we've had to clearly get clearance, like from the top to come in. And in the very early days, my co-chair of the Legal and Courts Committee, at the time she was a Commonwealth attorney and working with me, and became a juvenile court judge. So her position and her understanding of what the Greater Richmond Trauma-Informed Community Network was, she came in initially and said, well, I can come to these meetings, I'm not really sure, I don't know what all this stuff means and how it really pertains to what we do. And I said, well, a lot, it pertains to a lot of what you do. And now she's one of the biggest cheerleaders that we have. And she really has helped to push it along within the court system here, in the juvenile court system here. And we also developed another initiative that's called the Road to Resilience. It's within the Richmond Police Department, so our city police department. And to focus really more on prevention was the goal, so that when people are coming into this, they understand what this work, how it may impact them. And we know many of them come in with their own stuff because we have a lot of military folks coming in to law enforcement here. So really educating them on intro to trauma and resilience. We trained all of the sworn officers, so it was about 500 through the training committee of the Greater Richmond TICN, and had several of them go through a train the trainer, where they're now training their new recruits as they're coming in. So they're teaching the curriculum as they're coming in. I think we're going to be making modifications in a really good way to this curriculum, just given all that our community has been through here in the last few months. And I think we have a lot of work to do, just given what people have experienced that are here. So trainings, I'm trying to think of the other things we've done to the Road to Resilience, because it's really been a pretty amazing project. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else that I'm really missing. Sorry, got off track when I'm looking at the chat, trying to not multitask so much.
There's even a space within the police department that you're able to get a mini grant to kind of update this space and kind of then space for officers, but it also is used for families. And at times, like when you're having to tell families hard things, you can bring it from there into this nice for tranquil space. You know, essentially you're working with children and things like you can bring them in there instead of down in the precinct where it's triggering and more re-traumatizing.
Mm-hmm. We did, so we have a break room or a sensory room. And we're very purposeful as we are if we're recommending this, and we do recommend it to most people of even using current space that they have to have things for all the different senses, you know, when they come into the rooms. So there are 4 of those in the agencies that we've been in. And one agency actually even converted another office space to be like a little mini gym, and it's inside of the court building. So it's a very hard place to get out and go out to work out or even to walk around because it's so contained, really. So they have a workout room and this break space that has all kind of really cool sensory stuff in it.
So I'm going to call on a few different people who have had some questions. So first, the very first one we got was from, let me scroll back. I don't know if it's Lorraine or Lorena, depending on where you're from. I'm going to unmute you. And you just have to accept the unmute in order to share.
Hi, yes. My question, I forgot what it was. I just put it in the chat box. But yeah, I'm interested in any resources that you have. You mentioned that you have the trauma-informed agency assessment. I'd like to know more about that and any other assessments that you have.
Thank you.
Sure, yeah, we do have a document that has a list of several of them. And I will actually, let me see if I can grab it really quick. And I can.
And many of these are listed on. We have not created any of our own assessments. We've been utilizing ones that have been created by, you know, by others and are and that have been shared with us.
But yeah, we're super grateful if you want to post them to the chat, and then I can also include them when I write the follow-up, or
Okay.
Jane will probably write the follow-up blog that includes resources for people. Okay, great. Thanks for those. Adriana had a question. I'm going to unmute you.
Okay, so basically, I think I've got the answer to my question, but basically it's in New Zealand, we here tend to say, well, we need to be qualified as teachers, we need to be qualified and we need to do the training and we need to go to those people who are qualified with the qualifications and the evidence that trauma-informed practice is the way to go. But after listening to you, I think what you're doing is that you're reaching out to other people who are passionate and you're utilizing the resources in the community and the knowledge of the people and the passion of the people and the resources on the internet. So you're not actually saying, oh, well, here's a university course that you can go on it and then come and talk to us. You're actually in the field utilizing people who are in the business, so who are on the ground and respond and using resources. So does that make sense?
Yeah, we're identifying kind of champions within these systems.
Yeah.
So to really kind of help open the door, right? So, you don't have to be an expert in this.
Yeah.
But you're passionate, you understand, and you're going to be that cheerleader that's going to maybe open the door so that we can have that conversation. And, we've also found, even just utilizing the documentary Resilience has been tremendously helpful with us for kind of starting that conversation. So we've screened that film over 200 times in our community, for small groups. So like kind of coming in and screening it for leadership at an organization or with staff or in schools or just in the public. And, and it ends with that call to action that everyone has a role to play and that this matters. And there's usually just a lot of enthusiasm. And that's often at the time when we can then kind of lead into, why this matters for your organization or system or community. So we've just found different ways, or just even using the TED Talk by Dr. Nadine Burke-Harris, like anything just kind of start that conversation and light that fire to then talk about the next steps. But it's usually just started with one person who was enthusiastic and passionate and kind of brought us in, and it's rippled from there.
I think now might be a good time to talk about the network that came about as a result of GRTICN throughout the state. So Melissa, if you could say a little bit about that, that'd be terrific.
Sure. So Lisa really created the name, like the Trauma Informed Community Network, out of one meeting. And, this network kind of developed, and we were meeting for, I think it was Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, like a year or two when Fairfax came on board, kind of in the early stages. But so after we'd been meeting for a couple of years, a number of the organizations that were part of the Greater Richmond TICN had footprints in other parts of the state. So people from other regions found out about us and kind of found out about what we were doing and would reach out and ask, how can we get a network or do something similar in our region? So we would often invite them to our meeting, or we'd come and we would sit down and talk with them about just kind of what we did and lessons we've learned along the way. And so Fairfax County really was the next one to kind of come on board. And then shortly after that, another one on the south side of Virginia in the Petersburg area came on board. And, within like just a matter of a couple years, there was probably about 4 or 5 of these networks that had kind of sprung up. And at that point, we made a concerted effort to be collaborative amongst those networks. And we started convening quarterly meetings where we would bring the leaders or conveners of those networks together to have on a quarterly basis to talk about how things were going, share resources, initiatives, tips, challenges, again, like a learning collaborative. Inviting more individuals from the state to our meeting as well. If we were learning about other initiatives that the state might be doing, we would invite them over so they can know what was happening on the ground. And then it's really just started to ripple from there, where I was getting more and more phone calls about how can we start this in our region. So to date, we now have 26 of these trauma-informed community networks. Again, early on, as there was like 3 or 4, we started to identify common themes amongst all of these networks. Each community network is also very unique because each community is very unique. It has very individualized issues that they're dealing with, but at the same time, there were some common threads amongst all of them. So Lisa and I created a kind of an infographic of key elements of the TICN. And then, pulled from what we learned from what the MARC communities were doing, and had lots of conversations with Leslie Lieberman and the group that were doing the work around the country. And at this, like I said, today we have 26. We just had our meeting yesterday. We had 26 networks all represented. We are at this point, a valued partner kind of at the state level. The governor has a children's cabinet that recognizes, trauma-informed community networks. We have a strong connection to policy at the legislative level. We have partnered with Voices for Virginia's Children, who, because of the work happening in the communities around the state, and there's geographical representation all over the state from all different parts. And because of that work from the ground, Voices created a campaign for a trauma-informed Virginia, which really uses the trauma-informed community networks as a place to hear what the issues are happening, what the needs are of the communities, what the issues are on the ground to help form their policy agenda. And then we work together to identify kind of the priority areas and the bills that we want to advocate for. And then we have a trauma-informed advocacy day every year. We have for the last 4 years now at the state, where we bring members from the TICNs around the state to come and talk to legislators, set up meetings. Our friends at Voices do advocacy trainings for all of our networks, just so there can be that connection of really changing policy and practices at that state level.
Awesome. We have a couple more questions. So we have one from Darlene first, and then we'll get to Kayla's question. So Darlene, I'm going to unmute you.
Yeah, hi everyone. I was just asking about the curriculum that you use, or I think I actually got an answer to my question that you just kind of share and utilize what's kind of out there. But as someone who's working with schools here in Texas, where trauma-informed is really a new concept, I've written my own, but I'm always interested in what other people are doing. So I just wondered if there was something out there that you could share.
Thank you.
Sure. We don't have a specific curriculum, that we are prescribing to. It's just kind of a collective of best practices from those that have been doing this work much longer than we have. Part of the the motivation of the schools committee that we have was to really do an exhaustive search of what's happening in communities across the country, who have data and who have outcomes, from really starting to infuse these practices in their school systems or their schools. And then really pulling that out and really modifying it for the needs of each, individual school system. Because within, Virginia, there's very different, from Northern Virginia, which is its own state, and then you have our very urban regions, our rural regions. So, one thing that, in Virginia, there's not, it's happening, in pockets. There's some school systems that are more advanced and further along than others. There's some that it's just a school here or there, or just a classroom. So part of what our motivation too for the schools committee is to really be reaching out, using our state network of TICN. We have a regional meeting where we pull leaders from around the state who are working in education to talk about what we're each using. Again, talk about lessons learned, what's going well. Many, school systems have created their own or have pulled from others, but we really try to kind of share and just stay connected and collaborative.
Hi. So I was just wondering if if your network has had any conversations or how they've responded to calls to defunding the police, just because it seems like that topic and to make that happen or rely less on police would require a lot of partnerships that are within the network already, like all the organizations that are involved. So I was just wondering if that was something with such a diverse network, if that's a conversation you've been able to have and how that's gone.
So it's not a conversation that we've been able to have as of yet. And I think there's a lot of things that we will be discussing and we'll be talking about in our Legal and Courts Committee, and then also with a larger network of folks. We've really had a lot happening here in terms of the racial justice movements, and the demand, I think, for the law enforcement partners that we have has been really big right now. And really preliminary discussions of what people have talked about so far is Wright funding the police instead of defunding. So putting the funds, and making it, better, and really looking at more of the community policing, and trying to figure out what the workforce needs here, not just in the city of Richmond. I mean, I think, across the state. So I think we're really in managing what's happening right now in our community, and looking for the right time to have some really meaningful conversations. We believe that it is a time that we can help because we have this network of people to bring people together, to be able to talk in a way that really hasn't happened before, and where we have the relationships and the trust with folks, and just be able to have really hard conversations in a thoughtful and in a really good way.
Lisa said about, we haven't had the conversations about defunding the police, but we have had lots of conversations about the impact of historical and systemic trauma. I mean, we're in Richmond, the capital of the South. I mean, it's, the capital of the Confederacy. We've had these conversations for years where we've brought people and even just done, I think from training on the front end to make people aware, and then just have the conversations about how systemic trauma and, impacts so many of our systems. I mean, many of the conversations we've had in our healthcare systems, our healthcare committee, especially recently because of the disproportionate impact of COVID on Black and Brown communities in our region. In Richmond City, the majority of the deaths in Richmond are people of color, in communities that have just been impacted by redlining and other issues around systemic racism. So we have had those conversations, but definitely around the defunding the police hasn't necessarily come up yet.
There's actually a question that I had that Carrie also had. So, and hers is better than mine. So if you want to ask her.
Go for it, Carrie.
Hi, thanks. For communities such as yours that were already well into the work of being trauma informed, how much better off do you think you are or have been with COVID and all the incredibly horrific details and red tapes and all that we've all had to deal with? Do you think you were so much better off because you had already started this work, or where do you think you'd be if you hadn't already started this work? That's what I've got. And I love the idea of saying, was it better funding or right funding for police? That's brilliant. I'm not sure exactly what the term should be, but it sounds a lot less inflammatory than defunding. So congratulations to you all. Yeah.
Thank you.
So I would say I can start, with, I know like even just with all the work that we've done in our school systems, for example, and, our three major like school systems within the Greater Richmond area have all chosen to go 100% virtual right now, where some of the outer line counties are doing that hybrid model where it's kind of half in person, half virtual. And I have noticed there's been so many conversations about supporting student and teacher mental health, really talking about the impact of this traumatic experience, on the staff and on the students. And there's been a lot of conversations, because we have the school systems are part of our network. There's been a lot of conversations about like strategizing on how best to support teachers during this time, how best to support students. There's been more requests for us to do trainings for all of their staff and continuously support them. So I feel like that is definitely an outcome of a lot of the work that we've already done with school systems over the years. Lisa, is there things you want to share?
Yeah, I think I was going to say the same thing. Like, I feel like having the connection that we have with people, we've given people a place to be able to share about how they're feeling, what they're thinking, what the needs are within their agencies, the needs within their communities. So we already have those, the relationships of people coming together. And then a lot of agencies reaching out for support for their staff or training has happened definitely, I would say even more so in the last probably month of what I've heard. and a lot of professionals who, I mean, there's just been a lot of community violence around, and the kids and families that we're working with and the people who are on our network are really having a tough time with. So I think, you know, having the resources, we certainly don't have all the answers of what people need, and just responding in the best way that we can. I mean, this has been hard for all of us. You know, we're in this shared thing together. So just trying to navigate and figure out something that feels like it's never ending, which it isn't never ending right now. And, you know, this is how we just try to keep a pulse really on what the network needs. And this one has been, we're in it together, but trying to bring what we think is helpful. We just had a speaker on our large meeting on Friday that talked about grief and loss, because we felt like that was responsive at this time. I mean, it's like there's so many losses due to COVID, human loss, you know, loss of job, financial, everything, and loss for kids of, you know, they can't be with their friends right now, they can't be in schools. So just making sure, you know, we bring things that we feel like are important. We also ask at our large meetings, every meeting, we have a survey for suggestions. So we want feedback, we want suggestions, we welcome the hard feedback, because it's really a network that's really meant to be there for people. So, and I think people have leaned on us in a way, in a good way, because they, you know, we don't have the answers. We're not the ones that respond to everything, but we have really, really good connections, and can look for people to come in to be able to share the information with us as much as with everybody else.
Okay, we have some great questions. Let's see, I'm echoing for somebody, I think. Okay, good. Is it pronounced McGinn? Maybe you could tell me how to pronounce your name, calling you.
It's McGinn, and it's great to see Lisa. Lisa, I don't know if you remember 2 years plus ago, we were just getting started. You spent a couple hours with me, and I'm just so grateful for that time you spent just giving me anything and everything I wanted. You were just so generous. My question is, and we are really trying to figure out, how do we know our work is making a difference? And you know, we have these long-term goals of, you know, reducing expulsions, higher school attendance, you know, fewer people seeking ER visits for drug overdoses, just, you know, but those we feel like are so far down the line, because our work is so long-term. What have you found is different now? Is there what do you feel like is better? You've talked about connections between people who are in your network, but is there anything else that's different? What have you known that has gotten better?
To me, Melissa, and I'm sure has a lot to say to this one too, but I think what came to my mind immediately was, I think there's a difference in training, because there's a place to bring people in for introductory and advanced training. So I think what we're seeing is people who are coming into the workforce, and people who've been in the workforce for a very long time, but maybe coming into an agency for the first time, they are getting trained pretty immediately. So they're coming for training when they're onboarding in the agencies. That to me seems very different than where we were even like 5 years ago, I would say. And I think the outcomes piece is one of the hardest things that we've had to try to figure out too. It's like, we know it's making a difference. We can hear from people who have more resources, who understand this work better, who do make decisions, like making recommendations for kids and families that are really good recommendations of what they need, and assessing and understanding, you know, what people need. But it's very, very hard to measure that. I mean, that has been, our outcomes committee has had a challenge since the beginning of, you know, when we first started. And we are really, really hoping, and I believe, I know it's going to happen with the community resilience tracker, but that's going to help show the progress of the agencies that are involved with our network. So we hope to use it as something to look at over time and see where people are needing more, or where they're really advancing in certain areas. And we feel like that would give us the best look of anything that we've tried to do. So Melissa, do you have anything?
I would just add, one of the things that we tried to do in our large meetings is have like a member spotlight where 1 or 2 members will kind of come and just talk for a few minutes, maybe 10, 15 minutes answer a couple questions about how they've really changed their practice, or how they've changed their response, or how they do things differently now that they've become more aware of trauma-informed practice and just understanding ACEs science and everything. And they're able to, speak to really, tangible, even just concrete things that they've been able to do in their practice, which really, I think, illuminates it in a better way for our members who are new to this work. So they can really see, this is actually how I change my day-to-day. This is how I interact differently with my client. This is how I interact differently with that family. This is how I respond in a different manner to that student who's struggling in class. These are some of the strategies I utilize in the moment. So they're actually able to give some very specific things, and that's been really helpful to kind of see that this is working, because we're seeing more and more people be able to actually speak to this. And then I would also add, even just, we're talking about like workforce development, even like at our university level. Lisa and I both teach at VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University. A number of years ago, trauma-informed practice was not talked about, in many of the courses. They had added, an elective on trauma, but now, number of years later, it's infused in all the classes, in many ways. There's that lens that, it's more common language, and there's a common understanding, with many of our practitioners. And then we see that in our schools of education as well, where they've now started to add, courses around understanding the impact of trauma, and its impact on learning and development.
Yeah, thank you. And, I'm glad to hear that you all are struggling with the outcomes piece too. We doing the same thing, counting the numbers of trainings and how many people are, have seen certain films and how many folks have done this or that. But I think we still are struggling to get at, therefore, what's different. And anyway, I don't want to monopolize this, but it's a hard thing to measure.
We saw that, Mabin, and that's why we developed the cooperative communities that has the community resilience tracker in it, because so many, we're starting to see more and more ACEs initiatives beginning to grapple with this. Is how are we making a difference? So we figured that if we could track the number of organizations that were starting on their journey to becoming trauma informed, and then pair that with the outcomes in the areas that they were in, whether it's a school district or a zip code that that the hospital covers, that we would be able to get at that answer in a faster way than currently data is gathered. And so, we're really glad to see that Richmond decided to do this, because I think that we're going to learn a lot from this initiative that'll be useful for others.
Jane, we have just a few minutes left, and I know we had some other great questions like from Gail and others, but I just wonder if you could take a few minutes to tell everyone about what the cooperative is, and maybe, I don't know if you were planning to have Lisa and Melissa speak a little bit as to why it made sense for them.
Yeah, that goes to the question about the future, is why did you decide to participate in the cooperative? And I'll just say a couple of sentences about it. As I said, we noticed that there were communities that had initiatives that had been around for long enough that they were starting to bump against this wall of needing more services and guidelines and tools. And so we developed a whole panoply of guidelines and tools and services for that purpose, and try to make it as cost effective. You know, it costs $5,000 a year for communities to join the cooperative, but try to make it as not a budget line item, but something that a lot less, so that communities, ACEs initiatives that were mature could fund this. So we just officially launched in June. We actually started to launch in January, and then COVID. So we had to wait for a while and relaunch. But we have 3 now, three communities, 2 in California, and one's Fresno and one's in Santa Barbara, and also Richmond. And Richmond was our first. So to be interested in this, which certainly makes a lot of sense for all the work that you all done. But yeah, why don't you all explain why you decided that this is a good idea?
I think I mean, just being able to be connected in a closer way with networks that are developed and maybe more developed than we are, to hear the things that they practice, that like maybe challenges, and learn from really developed networks, because we have led, and thankfully, the way in Virginia, and really have given guidance to other networks, and we are looking for the same, and to share, you know, what we've experienced, certainly, and to hear what others have experienced. And definitely, I think the trainings, the specialized trainings that are going to be coming out, particularly right now, like the diversity, equity, and inclusion sort of training, would be, I mean, very good timing for us, and the community resilience tracker, all of those things. All of it is exciting, but I would say those are the main reasons that we really wanted to get started.
I think we can start to wrap things up and maybe just take some concluding comments. I mean, I think I'll call on Gail. You had typed something earlier. I can't remember what, and maybe it was answered. But if you want to say anything, Gail.
Hey, hi, Lisa. It's
Hi.
Great to see you after several years. I just wanted to know if you two and Melissa, if you guys have any advice for groups that are not as advanced as you. So, like, I just was hearing you're talking about how, you know, you talked to somebody and they were like, no, we have too much going on. I feel like right now in this world, people are thinking, and actually groups, we're here in California, groups are challenged with just one thing after another. And what advice do you have to say this is exactly what you should be doing right now? Or should they?
Great question, Gail. Thank you.
I would just say recognize that you're going to get pushback, and to not give up, that, you know, that this is long-term work. You know, I try to identify, you know, those people that are kind of champions, no matter, you know, where they are in the community, or, you know, what rank in an organization. You know, for many of us, we've just started, like I said before, with existing relationships and being able to have those conversations and getting, you know, somebody else on board. Using, like I said before, like using existing, like the resilience documentary, or Paper Tigers, or TED Talks, you know, things that can kind of help to introduce that conversation has just been a great way to begin.
We've invited people to come to our meetings, which would be very easy now since we're virtual, everything, just to see, and really being upfront from the very beginning with anybody who's asking about our network, that every community is really different. You know, this is one way of doing things, and it isn't the only way. And people get, I think, a little bit intimidated, I would say, when they hear 500 people. And that's not where we started, you know, like, so we've had to grow and make changes and do all the things. And we go to meetings in other communities in Virginia to share about what our network is and answer questions for anyone who's thinking about starting. Melissa's done tons of work across the state over the last year. So I think if anyone on here is ever interested in just talking to us more, or watching one of our meetings, which are not as exciting virtually, but you're certainly welcome to come on. And we are putting together this document about the key elements in a trauma-informed community network to help to answer that question a little bit of like, what was it that helped it to be so successful? So be on the lookout for that soon.
And that was such a great question, Gail, which reminded me about one of the things that seems really exciting about being a co-op member is the think tank. And Jane, maybe you could kind of explain, because for all of you who are on the call who are thinking, how do I connect with others who are doing great work and make that happen in my own community? That is one of the benefits being offered for being a cooperative member. Jane?
Yeah, so there's two levels of communities on ACES Connection. One is it's for any a few people who want to start an initiative in their community, and we all the community facilitators who are on this call will help you one-on-one with getting that started and also growing it. And so, as I said earlier, when it gets to a point when you're 400, 500 people, or even before that, if you're a couple hundred people and you're making really good headway in your community, then you might want to think about joining the ACES Connection Cooperative. We will work with you to determine if that's we don't want you to waste your money in this, so we'll work with you to find out if it's really the good move right now, or if you need to do a couple other things first. And then once you once you join the cooperative, you will have access to things like this think tanks, and those are as actually they were Gail's brainchild. It's like having a pop-up learning collaborative. The cooperative members can get together and say, look, we want this. Like Lisa said, it looks, we're pretty certain we need some diversity, equity, and inclusion training. And we can provide that right now. And I think it's rather than doing it just Richmond and us, it makes more sense for everyone in the cooperative to talk about this because people can share how they're working the best practices and policies into their community, and and what they found out doesn't work. So that information can be shared, and these they can accelerate the use and practical application of this information. So that's how we're approaching it. And so we see things that we know that communities want, but also communities know better than we do individually what they need. And so that's why we want to be open to saying, okay, here's the structure, we can provide that. What do you all want, so that we can make best use of this structure?
Thanks, Jane. So yeah, you know what? Because I know that folks, even if they didn't join live, we'll be sharing this video. So if you could just answer Carrie's question about the way you funded, or whatever you feel comfortable sharing about how you funded your cooperative. I know that's going to be so useful to everyone who is watching, now or later, or who's curious about, joining our cooperative.
Sure. So we had a conversation with the Community Foundation about providing us with a grant to cover the cost of the cooperative. And when they heard, I wish somebody on here was there from Community Foundation, just about the network and all the different discipline sectors and everybody that was coming into the mix. We actually have somebody now from the Community Foundation that is on the TICN, so who joined. And felt like what an amazing place where people are bringing information together, sharing resources, and just saw the value pretty immediately, I think, in having, this co-op opportunity. So we have the full 5,000 from them for our first year.
We've invited a lot of funders over time to our meetings as well, so that they can stay connected to what we're doing.
So, Jane, did you have anything to wrap up? I mean, I just wanted to say kind of to go off of what you were saying, Jane, is, for those of you watching who are not already part of a community, it's available to form a free community at any time. I always tell people there's literally no downsides to forming a community on our website, because you get to connect with our 45,000 members. You get to have this great place for all your community members to connect and share information, which I like that we call it celebrate your successes. And I'm going to drop another link in the playlist. We just created a whole video series all about our communities, our regular free communities. And we encourage, and we know, I mean, Adriana has been coming to all these, and she thought, hey, we need one in New Zealand. So she got one going. It's so inspiring. And so, we, not too far up in the chat, I did drop a link in there with all of our communities by location and interest that you can join. But if there's not a community in your area, we would love to talk to you about starting a community, and we will help you do that. So we will give you the step-by-step process to get a community in your area going. And so if you just don't even know where to start with that, just go ahead and send me an email, and I will connect you with the community facilitator that is right for your region. I'm be more than happy to hear from you. So I'll let Jane wrap this up, and thanks for staying a little bit late. And thank you so much, Lisa and Melissa, and thank you, Jane. And yeah, I'll let you wrap it up, Jane.
Thank you. Well, thank you to Melissa and Lisa, because this has been wonderful. And I know people got a lot out of this. Our intent and our reason for being here is to spread the word of this amazing knowledge about ACEs science and how people are using it to actually make a huge difference in the world. I mean, when you think about schools that have eliminated expulsions and suspensions, programs that bring recidivism and batter interventions, batters in domestic violence situations down to from 60% to 1%. I mean, the stories go on and on. And so with everything that everybody's doing, we want to accelerate the spread of that information so that we can make a difference in the world sooner than later. We have a lot of challenges going on now, and time's a wasting. So we're pretty insistent about this, and we hope that you will be on board and continue spreading the word. But thank you, Lisa. Thank you, Melissa. You're doing such great work in Richmond, and we're looking forward to working more with you.
Thank you
for having us.
Awesome. Well, I learned a lot, and I always learn a lot from you both, and it's so inspiring what you're doing. There's the link that I just dropped into the playlist all about growing resilient communities, the free ones, the co-op ones, all the different ways that you can make your community trauma-informed, which is what we're all aiming for. And so thank you all for joining us today. What you can do to save all the amazing resources in the chat is to just click on the 3 little buttons there in the lower right-hand corner and then click Save Chat. But then also Jane will be sure to post a summary onto our website with all of these resources and the recording. So thank you all so much. The next A Better Normal is Thursday. It's our weekly Education Upended that happens every Thursday. So we hope to see you there for that. Yeah, thanks so much. Have a great rest of your Tuesday.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.